Christopher Pyne, what answers will you be pursuing from the government over its stimulus spending?
It stood out as very obvious to us that if you're going to spend, at that point, $14 billion on primary schools, that there would be an immediate impact on inflation in that area, because there wouldn't be enough workers, there wouldn't be enough resources to fulfil all those contracts as quickly as the government demanded. We knew that meant that business would have to push up their prices and that the department should relax those rules in terms of the timetable, so that the stimulus could be rolled out over a longer period of time. The government didn't do that, and as a consequence, business has profiteered from the school stimulus debacle. The states have taken the opportunity to pull a number of their own infrastructure projects off the table and use federal taxpayers' money for state government responsibilities. There's been an enormous payment of fees to consultants and to project managers, as much as $500,000 for 6 months' work in Queensland for some project officers. So there's been an enormous amount of waste and mismanagement, and yet the government's found the money for $3.5 million for plaques, $3.8 million for display signs outside schools, which found to be outside the rules. And generally, it's an absolute shambles, a bungle from a minister with too much on her plate.
The Auditor-General is investigating the overall primary schools scheme following a request from you, I think. I mean, why not just leave it to the Auditor-General to finish that? And do you expect that it will add to its inquiry these allegations that some funds have been not been distributed fairly?
Well, the Auditor-General is doing a comprehensive study of the so-called building the education revolution, which some people call the school stimulus debacle. We asked him to put in place the parameters for spending that you would have expected the government to put in place at the beginning. That will take him some time. I don't think he'll be reporting until the end of the year. Meanwhile, the government continues to flush money out the door to every school in the country, regardless of the need of the school, regardless of what the school wanted. They're being given the Julia Gillard Memorial School halls rather than, in many cases, the classrooms that schools wanted. And we're seeing examples like $250,000 spent on a one-student school, $250,000 spent on a four-student school. The Auditor-General will do their job, but the opposition has to do its job, which is to hold the minister to account. And in this area, clearly there has been serious waste and mismanagement, and as a consequence, the government will continue to be borrowing money to fund this waste and mismanagement, which will eventually lead to higher interest rates and higher taxes.
I presume from what you've been saying today and in past weeks that the opposition will be targeting particularly the Deputy Prime Minister, Julia Gillard, over the next fortnight, in question time over the next fortnight. Has it got a bit personal between you two? Because, of course, Deputy Prime Minister described you as a mincing poodle earlier this year. Is it got personal here?
No, not at all. I've been in politics for 16 and a half years, and I've got a pretty thick skin. I think Julia Gillard has a pretty thick skin from what I can gather, and I simply play the ball. The ball is the waste and mismanagement in the school stimulus debacle, her failure to understand the needs of rural and regional youth in the youth allowance disaster, the trade training centres not being delivered as promised, and the blowout in computers in schools from $800 million to $2.2 billion. So it's simply a failure of policy on her part. And the Prime Minister really needs to appoint a full-time education minister rather than a minister who splits education between three other serious responsibilities.
Will the Coalition join the Greens in the Senate to force Treasury head Ken Henry to come before a Senate committee again and inquire into the stimulus spending?
Well, without the opposition's support, of course, it won't happen. So that's something that the opposition will need to consider today and tomorrow as part of our tactics, and we'll take a number of considerations into play in making those decisions. But we won't just, Fran, be focusing on the school stimulus debacle, youth allowance and so forth. The housing for Indigenous people in the Northern Territory has been another absolute schmozzle of Jenny Macklin, the Minister for Families and Community Services. There are a lot of examples of basic competence not being met by the government, and that lack of competence costs taxpayers money, and that is the reason why higher taxes will eventuate and higher interest rates because of the government's political solution rather than its economic solution.
Okay, Christopher Pyne, thank you very much for joining us on Breakfast.
It's a pleasure.
Christopher Pyne, Manager of Opposition Business in the House.